Folks, thanks a lot for the 80,000 subscribers. You guys are awesome. But we're not stopping here. Let's push it, folks, to 100,000 subscribers. So give that support to the channel and subscribe and hit that like button down below to reach our goal of 153 likes. And now let's go for it. The story kicks off with this intense rain just pouring down, covering the deserted streets of a city. There's this young lad making his way across the barrier of a bridge. After a quick internal ponder, he just hurls himself into what seems like the end, death and all. But just when he's about to have that split-second regret, bam! The vampire pops out of nowhere and swoops in to stop the fall, telling the kid to hold back the tears, because his blood's gonna taste even worse if he cries. Next thing you know, the vampire's sinking his teeth into the poor lad's neck for a quick snack. Now in some distant, unknown world in this massive castle, there are a few voices pondering on who the next big shot lord is gonna be. One voice is all in for this big shot ruse. Then this old crone calls for quiet and spills the beans that the next vampire lord's gotta be someone with some real kick-ass powers. But get this, only a perfect vampire, one who's found his destined partner and turned her into a vampire, is worthy of the throne. So the vamps around are scratching their heads, wondering who fits the bill. And there's this one dude, seems real keen on the destined partner part. Back in the human realm, there's Yamamoto Mito. Just got the boot from this ramen joint called Man's Generation, because the boss found out he's been crashing there overnight. Mito's going on about not having a dime to his name for a proper place, so he's asking for some time to sort it out. But the boss ain't having it, saying customers have been griping because there are so many gals coming in to see him that the guys won't even set foot in the joint anymore. So he hands Mito his stuff and declares it's the end of the line. But hey, as a silver lining, the guy throws in that a looker like Mito won't have trouble snagging another gig. So there's Mito, walking the streets, feeling low because he's lost yet another job, this time without even getting paid. He knows it's on him, but that doesn't stop the gloom. Then this group of school gals walks by, chirping about his looks. Mito turns around trying to figure out what's up, and these gals are practically losing their minds because they got a glance from the handsome dude. But Mito's got bigger fish to fry, like a measly 12 yen in his wallet, meaning another night camped out on the sidewalk. So he's reaching out to his folks up in heaven for help, reflecting on how he's needed it ever since his folks kicked the bucket. Cop asked him once if he remembered anything from the fire that took him, but his mind was a blank. After that day, all that mattered was buried in the rubble of his home. For the longest time, he bounced around from relative to relative, feeling like a burden wherever he went. Then one day, he got the boot after a relative took care of his compulsory education. So from then on, Mito was on his own. According to her, a pretty face like his wouldn't have a rough time on the streets. So the kid's been desperate for work, but he either gets the boot from manual labor gigs because he's not as burly as the rest, or runs into the brick wall of unemployment, keeping him on the streets. So now, all Mito's got left is to cross that bridge and try his luck on the other side of town. Meanwhile, over at La Fray's restaurant, meaning Strawberry in French, there's this handsome and charming waiter living up to the name of the joint, serving up tasty dishes and visually stunning plates to a crowd of women swooning over both his looks and the strawberries meticulously laid out. After tending to his customers, this waiter notices the rain just starting. Outside, Mito's out there on the prowl for any chance to shake off unemployment. Once the rain starts, he sees folks popping up their umbrellas or kids his age calling for their moms to pick him up. But Mito's got only himself and his backpack, using it to try and dodge the rain while making a dash for some cover. Finally, he makes it under the awning of La Fray's, but his little backpack didn't stop his clothes from getting soaked, and all that running made his body realize it hasn't had a decent meal in ages. So Mito staggers and falls right into the restaurant, accidentally knocking over a potted plant. Embarrassed, he starts cleaning up right away, and to top it off, he cuts his finger on a clay shard. That's when a La Fray's employee comes over to tend to him. Noticing the bleeding, he takes Mito to fix up his wound in the back. Mito's thinking it's no big deal, this injury, but the waiter shows his true colors by licking the kid's wound. But man, it tastes so foul, like sewer-level bad, that Mito can't help but cry and gag in disgust. According to the waiter, Mito's blood is thick, sticky, and tastes like meat that's gone bad and sat in the sink for a week. The kid's like, "What's your deal, man? You're the one who started licking my finger." But the waiter's like, "Hey, your blood looked good. Got curious." With that said, Mito realizes this dude's doing some vampire stuff, but of course he ain't buying it. So the waiter kicks the kid with the rancid blood out of the restaurant, and Mito's out of there, tripping on the bizarre behavior of that guy. In the back of La Fray's, the waiter gets approached by another dude asking how the tasting went, seeing as it's been 10 years since he's had any human blood. The waiter's like, "How'd you get here, Komori?" And he's like, "It's my duty as a butler." So the waiter's saying the taste was awful and human blood just ain't it. But Komori thinks the bad taste is because the victim ain't loved by nobody, cause apparently The amount of love a human receives and gives back determines the flavor of their blood, which can be as sweet as a strawberry. Obviously, female blood's better, but a loved-up man's can be just as sweet. So finally, Komori asks Ruka what he thinks about taking care of the kid till he reaches that sweetness level, because even though Ruka's been off human blood for 10 years, it's clear he wanted to sink his teeth into that young guy. However, Ruka responds that he prefers to stick with his strawberry juice if blood tastes that horrible anyway, and tells Komori to stop trying to give orders around there. At that moment, Komori remembers that he is the founder, and putting the waiter in his place, he informs that in his homeland, many are questioning Ruka's ability to take his place as leader. According to the founder, this is because Ruka has forgotten the purpose of being in the human world, and this is causing a commotion in the conclave. Therefore, to become a perfect vampire and take Komori's place, Ruka must fulfill the duty assigned to him. At this moment, another waiter asks Ruka for help because the restaurant is very busy, and before he leaves, Komori asks the vampire to remember why he's here. After an exhausting shift, Ruka asks his colleague to pass him some strawberry juice because the bad taste in his mouth is sinister. The colleague asks if he ate some junk, and Ruka replies that it was thick, bitter, and icy junk. Having said that, he recalls the founder's theory about the lack of love in the victim, while the other waiter asks what he's talking about. Ruka tells him to forget it and reflects that the young man must be very lonely to not have anyone's love. Speaking of him, Minnow runs like crazy to protect himself from the rain, but a motorcycle passes by quickly and splashes water on the boy. With this added annoyance, Minnow thinks about how lucky he is and gives up avoiding the rain altogether. A little further ahead, he crosses the bridge back to the other side of the city, but he knows that wherever he goes, he has nowhere to go in the end. In Minow's mind, this is a clear sign that nobody will miss him if he happens to leave this world, and in his longing for affection, he plans to throw himself in the hope that anyone, will mourn his death. However, he gives up the idea and believes that tomorrow he might find a job, but ends up slipping and falling off the bridge altogether. Then, after Ruka saves his life, the vampire asks how he is, and Mito wonders when was the last time someone asked him that. Ironically, even in the face of the circumstances, Mito feels happy and welcomed, so Ruka finally bites the boy's neck and licks the blood that was dripping. After that, Ruka throws Mito unceremoniously onto the fence and says that his blood is horrible, but it'll do. Then he wants to know if the boy wanted to take his own life on that bridge, and Mito says that nobody needs him. In that case, the vampire suggests that Mito become his source of food because that way he will be needed. Aware of the proposal, Mito gradually accepts that he is in the presence of a vampire, undead beings that suck the blood of their victims, but soon the boy faints from everything he experienced that day. During this time, a dream of a vampire that takes him to the skies and feeds on his blood invades the boy's mind, who is then awakened by a cat and a bat flying above his bed. Seeing the boy wake up, Ruka informs him that they are in the boy's dormitory of Hijiragoka School for Boys where he lives and studies. Finally, he asks the boy to take a shower so he doesn't get sick, and after that, he can go home. Mito asks about that story about being a food source, but Ruka replies that he was just kidding because he may be thirsty, but he prefers not to suck the blood of a scared kid. However, Mito understands the warmth he felt as a reason to surrender to the vampire, but as soon as he affirms that he wants to become a vampire's meal, Ruka throws him into the bathroom and tells the emotional boy to take a quick shower to get out of there. Mito says he has nowhere else to go afterwards, and Ruka replies that it makes sense for the boy's blood to be bad because nobody really loves him. Mito asks what he can do to improve his blood, and the vampire reveals that for that, the boy needs to learn to be loved by him. Upon hearing these words, Mito becomes emotional and remembers every moment when Ruka spoke about needing him, seeing in it the possibility of receiving the love he never had before. So he agrees to be loved for his blood to become less bitter and become a food source. Having said that, the vampire opens the door and introduces himself as Sotone Ruka, promising to love Mito every day, but the boy feels embarrassed and locks him out to take a shower. Ruka says that from now on, the two will live together there, and Mito makes it clear that he's not doing it just to have somewhere to stay. Then the boy questions if he's doing the right thing while he changes clothes and outside. Ruka reveals that Mito saved his life because he never managed to suck the blood of women, so he always looked for a handsome boy for himself. However, while listening to those words, Mito reveals his true identity and wonders what will become of her now. Myth dreams about a woman saying that when a girl is loved, her blood tastes like strawberry, which makes vampires crave it more and more. When Myth wakes up, she comes face to face with the same cat from the night before named Marion and is startled to realize she was sleeping smuggled up with Ruka. The girl asks the vampire why he's sleeping with her, and Ruka explains that it's to make her blood sweeter. This makes Myth remember that the vampire let her live with him in exchange for being his food. However, Ruka made this choice thinking Myth is a boy, which makes her wonder what will happen if he finds out the truth. Suddenly, Ruka pulls the girl closer to have her breakfast. She says she didn't know he would suck her blood so early, and the vampire explains that being her food means letting him feed whenever he wants, even if it tastes horrible. Myth realizes that this way she'll end up with holes all over her neck. So Ruka uses his vampire powers and makes the wound disappear with a wave of his hand. Then the girl sees a bat in the room and remembers seeing it the day before. Suddenly, the animal reveals itself to be Komori, Ruka's butler, who, after being introduced to Myth, shows a uniform he brought for her to attend Ijirigoka Boys' School. And so Myth goes to study at the school, which makes her very nervous, fearing someone will discover her secret. Ruka notices something bothering Myth and thinks it's because of the class. So he reassures her, explaining that all the classmates are nice and he'll also be there for whatever she needs. Then the two enter the classroom and Myth introduces herself to all the students in the class, being careful to make a good impression. The guys are impressed with the new classmate, and one of them recognizes Myth, having seen her in the cafeteria where he and Ruka work, and introduces himself as Kagurazaka Takara. Myth is relieved to see that everyone is really nice, just as the vampire said, and she chats with the guys when another guy arrives in the classroom and stares at her from afar. Later, Myth gets tired of attending classes when Ruka invites her to work part-time at the cafeteria because the vampire knows she needs money and his butler, Komori, is the owner of the place. At the cafeteria, Komori accepts the new employee calmly, and Ruka shows Myth the locker room to put on the work uniform. Then the vampire starts changing, which leaves the girl not knowing what to do. He tells Myth to put on the uniform too, and she tries to stall him, saying she'll change later. But Ruka doesn't understand why and starts taking off Myth's blouse. The girl quickly pushes the vampire out of the locker room, and he agrees to go ahead so she can change alone. Myth is relieved but thinks that Ruka almost found out she's a girl and decides to be more careful not to be discovered. After changing, Myth meets Takara and another schoolmate, Juri, whom she finds as cute as a porcelain doll. Then Myth notices the cafeteria customers who were enchanted by the vampire's beauty. This makes her realize that, with Ruka being so popular and surrounded by beautiful girls, he could definitely get blood with a better taste than hers. After that, Ruka asks Myth to go get some fruits in the pantry, and she goes there while thinking that if he can have any girl's blood, he doesn't need her. Suddenly, Myth sees Juri watching her at the pantry door. The guy says she's different from the other students and may have fooled Ruka and Takara, but he knows she's hiding something. The girl doesn't know what to say and Juri approaches her, causing her to hit the pantry shelf and knock some things down. Quickly, the vampire runs to Myth and protects her, but in doing so, he ends up getting hurt. Everyone is worried about him and Juri feels guilty for hurting his friend, but Myth says it's not his fault since she bumped into the shelf. Then the girl takes Ruka to the dormitory so he can rest, where the vampire warns that such a small wound can heal completely as soon as he feeds. Upon learning this, Myth quickly lies down on the bed and Ruka drinks her blood so fast that he ends up choking. She feels bad, thinking it's because of her bad taste, and regrets not having as good blood as a girl's. The vampire consoles Myth and says she's already enough after all, his wound is healed, and he only choked because he drank too fast. Then Ruka puts a vampire tool on the girl's neck, which he explains is called sang sucre and serves to evaluate the taste of human blood, where the blue color means the taste is bad. Myth feels bad because this is the current color of her tool, but the vampire says he will make it turn red like strawberry. Furthermore, Ruka remembers that it's his fault for not being able to feed on girls' blood. Myth is worried and asks why this is. Then Komori, who was in the room listening to their conversation, opens a secret shelf, revealing that the reason the vampire can't feed on women's blood is because he's an otaku who only likes 2D girls. Myth is shocked by the discovery, and Ruka admits that he's a fan of an anime about two magical girls fighting to save the world. Seeing Myth's reaction, he questions what's wrong with being an otaku, since he supports his hobby with his own money and treats real girls well, even though he doesn't get along with them. Komori tells Myth that to make matters worse, every time he suggested to Ruka to feed on someone, his master refused, saying he didn't want disgusting men's blood, and for that reason, he is grateful for Ruka having found her. The girl feels relieved that the vampire doesn't feed on women because of such a simple reason that she starts laughing at the situation and enjoys herself with Ruka, while wondering if she could stay there forever, even with her lie. Later, Mina goes to a restaurant to satisfy her hunger because she needed to replenish the energy that the vampire has been draining. At that moment, the girl notices Takara and Juri watching her, astonished by her appetite. Takara asks if Ruka is okay after the accident he had at the cafeteria, leaving her at a loss for words because she couldn't reveal that the vampire had already completely healed and spent the rest of the day excitedly watching his favorite anime. Stabino simply replies that Ruka is fine because the cut wasn't very deep. Takara is relieved and tells her that Juri was so worried about what happened that he barely slept at night. Then the guy walks away to get some ramen, and Juri takes the opportunity to apologize to Mito. The girl says it's okay and confesses that she really hides a secret from them, and she makes it clear that it's nothing that will hurt Ruka or anyone else. Juri notes that everyone has a secret and says he won't investigate anything else about her. He begins to say that he also has a secret when Taka returns and tells Mito that he and Juri have been friends since childhood. At that moment, the guy from their class who stared at Mito on her first day shows up on a motorcycle at the cafeteria door. The girl asks who he is, and Juri explains that his name is Nikita Ren and he's a delinquent who constantly gets into fights and advises her to stay away from him. Mito agrees to keep her distance from the guy, but when she arrives at the boys' dormitory, she finds Ren standing right at the door of her room. He tells her that he heard she's sharing the dorm with Ruka and asks them to talk in the backyard. Outside, Ren asks Mito if she doesn't know that her roommate is a vampire, acting as if he's worried that she's in danger, even going as far as punching a wall. At that moment, Ruka appears questioning why Ren went after his roommate instead of saying what he wants to his face, and Ren leaves, saying he has nothing to say to him. After the delinquent walks away, Ruka asks how Mito is and shows concern that her encounter with Ren made her feel worse. Then the vampire starts feeding right there, which worries the girl that someone might see them and discover what he is. Ruka acts as if he has nothing to worry about, and Mito complains about his attitude and says she cares about him, which makes Ruka embarrassed. Not knowing how to respond to the girl, the Otaka vampire says a line from an anime. Mito finds it strange, and Ruka explains that he always uses it as a reference to show his love for her. However, this leaves Mito quite irritated. After all, she was genuinely worried about Ruka while he was just repeating lines from a series he likes. After Mito leaves in anger, the vampire wonders what happened since he was supposed to be teaching her about love, not the other way around. Later in Juno class, Mito watches Ren fighting and remembers when he punched the wall with just one punch and notices that he is really strong. Juri hears her comment and says that Ren has always had a somewhat destructive side, while Ruka is so fast that sometimes he doesn't even seem human. Mito notices that Juri is observant when the teacher calls her to fight Ren. The girl gets irritated that Ruka let the guy find out that he's a vampire and tells Ren that she'll protect Ruka from him. At that moment, the guy notices 2 holes on Mito's neck. Then he knocks her down to end the fight in a second and takes her out of the room. Ruka sees the 2 leaving and gets worried about the girl. Alon Ren says he knows that the wound on Mito's neck means that she's not just a roommate of the vampire, and he says he's worried because no one except them at school knows about Ruka, and if she keeps feeding him, she'll end up becoming a vampire too, and won't be able to live as a normal human anymore. Ren says that for this reason, he can't allow that to happen because it's something that can't be undone, and advises Mito to leave and go back to her parents because vampires are already lifeless and heartless monsters. This makes the girl question the guy because for her, living humans are much more monstrous since they judge by appearance and discard people when they become inconvenient, and that's why Ruka has a much bigger heart than other people. Mito still says that if she stays with him, unlike what Ren thought, she won't lose anything because there's nothing left to lose, and that Ruka was the only one who reached out to her. And if he's a monster, she'd rather be with a monster 1,000 times than with people. Even so, Ren says he cares about Mito and will protect her from the vampire. The girl is surprised by the guy's concern, but since she wants to be with Ruka, she just reassures him that she won't turn into a vampire. Then Ren apologizes for being so rough and tells the 2 to go back to class. Mito responds that it's okay and suggests that they both skip class. And so they leave talking while Ruka watches them from afar. The vampire was listening to their conversation and thinks how Ren is very brave to get so close to his food. Then Ruka remembers Mito saying that he has a bigger heart than other people and wonders what he's feeling for her. After spending some time with Mito working at the cafeteria, the girl gets the hang of how to do the job properly, and Juri and Takara comment that they've been wanting to throw her a welcome party for a while. To celebrate, they decide to spend a weekend having a barbecue, and the idea gets Mito really excited since she's never had barbecue before. She starts begging Ruka to come along too, which makes the vampire feel awkward, but he ends up agreeing to join the outing. As Mito gets closer, Ruka's heart races, and Komori notices that something is wrong with his master and finds it strange since vampires can't get sick. Later, Juri and Takara explain that they have a cool place for them to spend the weekend, with outdoor hot springs, and since they're going glamping, a luxury camping trip, they won't need to bring tents or sleeping bags, just a change of clothes. Mito didn't have anything to wear, but Juri says she can borrow something to wear. Ren overhears the group's conversation and remembers when he was a child and his mother agreed to leave with his father, who was a vampire, even though she knew that by doing so, she would never be human again. He regrets not being able to protect his mother and decides he won't let the same thing happen to Mito. During the weekend, the four go camping and Mito gets all excited when she sees the luxury campsite that Takara arranged and explains to her friends that this is the first time she's traveled, making Juri wonder what kind of life she led. Later, the group starts preparing everything for the barbecue when they see Ren arriving on a motorcycle and they wonder why he decided to camp right next to them, when there are so many other places to do it. While Ren sets up his camp, Ruka and Mito wonder what he's planning, and she remembers that Ren promised to protect her from the vampire. Then Ruka decides to grab Mito and carries her to the stream, where he tosses her into the water, showing jealousy after seeing her looking at Ren. The girl joins in the fun and pulls Ruka into the stream, getting them both soaked. So they decide to take advantage of already being wet and start having fun splashing water at each other until Juri interrupts the play to remind them that they still needed to finish preparing the barbecue. Before getting back to work, Mito thanks Ruka for agreeing to the idea of the two of them going on that trip because she's never had so much fun in her life. At that moment, a drop of water falls into the girl's eyes, and she lifts her shirt to dry herself, making the vampire feel awkward. Mito notices Ruka staring at her and becomes afraid that the wet clothes will reveal her secret. Because of that, she rushes into the cabin to change, using the excuse of being afraid of catching a cold. Ren sees Mito distancing herself from the rest of the group and takes the opportunity to talk to her outside the cabin. He asks if she's made the vampire promise not to turn her, and she explains that she hasn't found the right moment yet. Then Ren reminds her that if she becomes a vampire, she'll lose everything she has, and there will be no turning back. Furthermore, he says that if she can't prove to him that there's nothing to worry about, he'll keep her away from Ruka, even by force. At night, the four enjoy the barbecue together, especially Mito, who's never had barbecue before. Meanwhile, Ren watches them from afar. Later, Mito is alone with Ruka, and the vampire takes the opportunity to satisfy his hunger, feeling so relieved to finally have fed that he doesn't even mind the bad taste of her blood. Then Mito asks if she's going to become a vampire. Ruka laughs, finding the question amusing, and makes it clear that was never his intention. He heals Mito's neck to leave no mark of his bite and explains that vampires aren't allowed to increase the number of vampires, and for that reason, they all have a destined partner to feed from. Ruka reveals that vampires say this destined partner has the best blood, and when found, the vampire can only drink from them. Because of this, Mito is serving as a substitute until he finds his partner. Knowing that her time with Ruka will eventually end and that she's nothing more than a substitute makes Mito sad. She runs away from him towards the trees when a moth lands on her forehead. The insect scares the girl, and she runs into the arms of the vampire, seeking his protection, who was coming after her. Ruka once again feels his heart conflicted with Mito's approach, and the girl realizes that his heart is beating as fast as hers. They stare at each other for a while, but then Ruka recovers from the moment and pushes her away, just in time for Juri and Takara to arrive and not see their love moment. The two were coming back from the outdoor hot springs of the place and comment that they had a great time. Right away, the girl takes the opportunity to escape the awkward situation she had with Ruka and says she's going to take a bath, and on the way, Ren sees her heading for the hot springs. Arriving there, Mito takes advantage of the empty place to take her bath without worry, where she reflects that if Ruka finds his destined partner, the two of them won't be able to be together anymore. Then Mito remembers that she went there to have fun and enjoy the trip and decides to focus only on doing that. So the girl admires the night when Ren arrives at the hot springs looking for her. Through a crack, he sees a woman bathing and remembers that the place is unisex, so it accepts both men and women. However, he recognizes the resemblance of the girl with Mito and notices her clothes that were left behind. To confirm his suspicion, Ren calls out to her and Mito responds, making him sure that the girl has been lying to everyone about being a boy. But instead of waiting outside, he decides to enter to take a bath too. Mito becomes anxious at the thought of being discovered, but manages to put on her wig just in time for Ren to open the door. Then he says he'll get in the water to not leave her alone as a way to ensure her safety, since there's no problem with them being there together. After all, they're both guys. The girl thinks for sure the guy is going to find out the truth, but he not only doesn't comment on having discovered her secret already, but also pretends to be clueless, acting as if he's just enjoying the hot springs and not noticing the obvious. So Mito notices that Ren's back is covered in scars, and he explains that when you're strong, you always attract someone wanting to cause trouble, and after facing the troublemakers, you're seen as a monster. Mito says the ones in the wrong in the story are the ones who started the fight with him, and that he's a good person and a trustworthy friend who cares and worries about others. Ren feels embarrassed to find out that Mito considers him a friend and turns his back on her, who takes advantage of the moment to leave the hot springs without being seen. Since the guy already knows the truth, he continues facing away, letting the girl leave peacefully. Suddenly, Ren hears a noise and rushes to see Mito and finds her lying on the ground, who explains that she got sick from spending too much time in the water. Then Ren carries Mito on his back to the camp and says that if she keeps that up, she'll turn into a vampire soon. The girl explains that this won't happen because Ruka doesn't intend to turn her, besides he has a predestined partner who isn't her. At that moment, the vampire appears with Juri and Takara, who were on their way to the hot springs because they were worried about Mito taking so long. Seeing the girl with Ren, Ruka gets furious and asks why the guy was carrying her, who explains that he's only doing it to help because Mito got sick from spending too much time in the water. Then Mito gets down and Ruka pulls her closer to him. Then Ren starts to leave and the girl hurries to thank him for his help, but the guy replies that there's no need to thank him, after all, they're friends. Afterwards, Juri and Takara approach and Ruka explains that she got sick because her body got too hot. They think that then the fireworks won't happen, but Mito, who was eager to make the most of the outing, says it's okay to participate in the fireworks. However, the vampire intervenes and says that the only thing that will happen is him taking care of her. Then Ruka leaves carrying Mito and tells Juri and Takara to enjoy the fireworks alone. He takes her inside the cabin and the girl realizes that Ruka really cared about her. The vampire makes a cold compress with a damp cloth and applies it to Mito's arms and legs, who is moved by his protection and care for her. But despite the happiness of that moment, the girl remembers that it's temporary, since she's just a substitute. Shortly after, Juri and Takara ask Ruka to take the fireworks outside because they forgot some inside the cabin. The vampire says goodbye to Mito and asks her to rest, but the girl holds him and says that she doesn't mind their relationship being temporary because until she meets her predestined partner, he should love her. Suddenly, Mito faints and falls asleep, and Ruka catches her in time to put her safely in bed. Meanwhile, outside, Juri and Takara enjoy the last remaining fireworks while waiting for Ruka to bring the rest to them, wondering about the friend's delay. Inside the cabin, the vampire is once again swayed by Mito and thinks that when he finally got close to forgetting the strange feelings he's having, she asks him to love her. Then Ruka, seeing Mito asleep, approaches, considering kissing her when he finally remembers that, as far as he knows, they're both men. And so, increasingly confused by his feelings, Ruka runs out of the cabin and meets his founder, who scolds him for falling in love with anime characters and a boy. The vampire remembers that, like all others, Ruka has a woman he's destined for, and because of that, he can't feel anything romantic for anyone else. The founder also says that if Ruka falls in love with someone else, he'll never meet his destined partner and will end up wandering the world forever as a lonely and bloodthirsty vampire. The founder says that for this reason, Ruka must look for his predestined partner and become a true vampire, capable of replacing him and becoming the new lord of the vampires, and until that happens, he can't fall in love with any man or woman. Ruka agrees with the founder and says he won't fall in love with anyone, determined to fight against the feelings he has for Mito. A few days after the camping trip, Mito goes to Juri and Takara to explain that she's worried about Ruka because since the trip, he's been going out alone early in the morning and returning late at night, and even though they share a room, they barely see each other. Takara agrees that it's indeed strange for Ruka to be going out alone, as he usually sticks with Mito. Additionally, although she doesn't tell her friends, the main reason for her concern is that Ruka hasn't been eating since the camping trip and is probably very hungry. The next day, Ruka goes to school ahead of Mito, who becomes worried because it's been almost a week since they've properly seen each other. At that moment, the girl sees the vampire in the hallway and grabs him, expressing concern that he hasn't eaten for days. She then takes Ruka to an empty room and offers her neck for him to feed on, making it clear to the vampire that he can take enough to last the whole week if he prefers. However, despite all her insistence, Ruka refuses to feed and says he's not hungry. With this attitude from him, Mito becomes certain that the vampire is avoiding her. At work, the girl wonders if the reason for this is because she asked him to love her during the camping trip when Komori appears, sensing that something is bothering her. The vampire offers a calming tea and deduces that Mito's worry has to do with her master. The girl explains that Ruka has been avoiding her in recent days and hasn't been eating, and she doesn't like the idea of him going hungry because of her. Komori comments that Mito is a kind person and, as a founder, admits that he understands why Ruka desires much more than just her blood. Suddenly, the two hear a commotion from the store's customers. Mito goes to see what it is and discovers that all the girls were enchanted by Ren, who went to the cafe to see her. The girl goes to him and he asks how she's feeling. Mito remembers that it's been a week since they went camping and she's already recovered from the effects of spending too much time in the hot springs. However, Ren notices that the girl isn't feeling well and asks Komori, the store manager, to borrow her. He agrees and is intrigued to see how Ruka will react to them leaving together, as he was watching the scene hidden. Ren takes Mito on his motorcycle to a commercial area and explains that it's the first time he's had a friend, so he doesn't really know what to do to make her feel better, but he thought doing something like shopping or having fun would help. Mito thanks Ren for trying to cheer her up but says there's nothing special she'd like to do. However, just then, she spots a women's clothing store and thinks about how it would be if she met Ruka as a girl. So Mito enters the store and asks to try on a dress. Ren is a little confused by her decision, but decides to wait outside while the girl, who everyone sees as a boy, tries on the clothes. In the fitting room, Mito takes off her men's clothes and puts on the dress, realizing she had forgotten the feeling of wearing women's clothes and how she looks wearing them. Outside, two girls decide to enter the store to shop and notice Ren, imagining he's waiting for his girlfriend. Meanwhile, Mito looks at herself in the mirror while wondering if anything would change if Ruka saw her in that dress. Suddenly, Mito hears from outside the fitting room some girls commenting that they saw a man enter there to try on a dress and decide to spy. Mito is afraid of being caught, but just as the two were about to open the fitting room curtain, Ruka appears to protect her from embarrassment. He tells the girls that there's nothing wrong with someone wanting to wear any clothes, regardless of what they are, and bets that the dress looks better on his friend than it would on them. So the girls leave and Ruka enters the fitting room, where he is surprised to see Mito wearing a dress. She explains that the reason for this is because she thought if he saw her like this, he would want to drink her blood. The vampire begins to analyze the girl in a way that embarrasses her, and says that he looks cute dressed as a woman. Then Ruka begins to feel the urge to feed and starts to express his feelings for Mito. But he remembers the founder saying that vampires shouldn't fall in love with anyone other than their destined partner and contains his feelings, saying he likes Mito as a very important friend, and for this reason, he doesn't need to pretend to be a girl. Next, Ruka announces that he's going to feed on her blood, and Ren, who was listening to the conversation outside, enters the fitting room, saying that while they may be friends, he's against the idea of the vampire feeding on Mito. The two guys start to argue and the girl finds it amusing. She then interrupts the discussion and thanks them for becoming her friends because she's very happy to have them both. Later, Mito kicks Ruka and Ren out of the fitting room to change clothes, leaving them embarrassed by her words and the fact that she's acting like a cute girl. Later, Mito sees in the mirror in her room that her necklace has changed from blue to orange as a result of the love she's been receiving and goes to show it to Ruka, excited about the idea that her blood has improved in taste. The vampire is happy to hear the news and is excited to finally feed on something that doesn't taste like spoiled curry. Komori overhears the conversation and suggests to his master that he allow him to prepare Mito so that her blood becomes even better. The butler takes the girl for a refreshing bath and explains that after she cleans up, she should apply a special strawberry perfume that arouses a vampire's appetite and wear a robe. After finishing giving instructions to Mito, Komori leaves the bathroom for the girl to take her bath. Ruka asks what he's up to and makes it clear that no matter what happens, he won't have anything more than friendship with Mito. Komori observes that because of the love his master has for her, the girl is releasing more pheromones than before, and after wishing them both good night, he flies out the window. Shortly after, Mito steps out of the shower in a robe, just as Komori requested, which leaves the vampire a bit off balance. She remarks that she's not sure if her blood has improved in taste or not, but she knows it will happen eventually since she has his and Ren's friendship. At that moment, Ruka catches a whiff of strawberry perfume and asks Mito to forget about Ren because he loves her much more. The girl feels embarrassed, and the vampire begins to feed on her blood while she thinks he won't love her as more than a friend. Then Mito notices that Ruka was taking longer to feed than usual and asks how it tasted. The vampire, clearly distracted, stops sucking her blood and says the taste changed from spoiled curry to spoiled strawberry. Disappointed, he goes to take a bath to cheer up, and Mito also feels sad knowing that the taste of her blood didn't improve and concludes that maybe the taste will only improve when the color of her necklace turns red. In the bathroom, Ruka is surprised to realize that while he was feeding, he was in a trance until she called him, to the point of not even caring about the awful taste. This makes the vampire struggle against the feelings he's having for Mito again because although he doesn't get along with women very well, he couldn't see the sense in falling in love with a guy. However, Ruka admits that for a moment he found Mito cute, and if things continue like this, he would end up falling in love. So the vampire decides to find a girlfriend for her, pretending that this way she would receive more love to change the taste of her blood. The next day, Ruka tells his friends about his idea and Takara immediately gets excited about the plan to find someone for his friend. So he sends an invitation to some friends from a nearby girls' school and 4 of them confirm. Juri notices that Takara arranged a girl for each one of the group, including him, which leaves the boy upset. He refuses to go with the others to meet the girls and gets irritated with Takara, who asks Ruka and Mito if they know another guy to go with them instead of Juri. So on the day of the meeting with the girls, they call Ren to support Mito as well, who does so, although clearly not wanting to have gone. When the girls arrive, one of them named Makimura Maina reveals that the 4 of them are first-year students at Yurigaoka Girls' School and are also fans of the coffee where they work. Mito notices that they seem like high society ladies when Maina asks to talk to her privately. Everyone is surprised at how quickly Mito managed to attract attention, and Takara pushes her closer to Meina, who invites her for a short walk. Outside, Mito doesn't know how to act after all. She's a girl disguised as a guy who's going out with a girl. Meina apologizes for her invitation and asks if she has any romantic interest in anyone, which makes Mito even more nervous about the situation. Meanwhile, Ren and Ruka watch the two of them in a stroll, and Ren thinks the vampire set it up, but he explains that he only asked Mito to get a girlfriend, and even though he didn't want to, admits that she fits with Meina. Then Mito saves the girl from being hit by a car, leaving Ruka jealous. So he decides to go home, and Ren observes that his face looks like that of someone with a broken heart. The vampire says he's mistaken because Mito is a man and they're just friends, but his words fail to convince even himself. Meanwhile, Meina starts to open up to Mito, and she thinks the girl is about to confess her feelings. However, contrary to what everyone was thinking, Meina reveals that she's been in love with Ruka for some time. Meina was surprised by this, and Meina explains that she found out they share a room, and being friends, she'd imagine she should know if the guy has a girlfriend. Meina feels sad to remember that she's nothing more than a simple friend to Ruka, and even though she feels a pain in her chest, she says that as far as she knows, he doesn't have a girlfriend. Meina is relieved and says she doesn't think she has any chance with Ruka, but if she decides to confess, she wants to ensure she won't cause any trouble for him. Meina notices that Meina is a good girl and says that as Ruka's friend, she wants him to be happy, and Meina is happy to receive her support. Afterwards, the two bid farewell, and Mito starts feeling bad again about being nothing more than food and a friend to Ruka when Ren appears. She tries to smile at him, but he notices tears falling from her face and gets worried. Then Mito leans on him for comfort when suddenly Ren starts feeling pain in his chest and asks her to step away. Hey folks, if you're digging this anime and want to see more, drop a like down below and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We need your support to hit 90,000 subscribers. Every subscription counts and helps us grow our community. Catch you in the next one.